Queen.th plot exposed, how the Queen came moments from being assassinated. Troubled Christopher John Lewis fired his rifle at Her Majesty during a visit to New Zealand, plotted to kill Prince Charles and was on trial for murder when he committed ssicide. It was a shot that nearly changed history. On October 14, 1981, Christopher John Lewis, a 17-year-old with a history of crime and mental health problems, shouldered his .22 rifle, aimed at the Queen and squeezed the trigger. Her Majesty was on a tour of New Zealand and greeting well-wishers in the city of Dunedin when Lewis's shot rang out. The bullet missed. The authorities, fearful of diplomatic disaster, covered up the assassination attempt, insisting the noise was a council sign falling over or someone letting off fireworks. Lewis escaped undetected and was only caught by chance, when brought in 8 days later for questioning on an unrelated matter. The story has only come to light now following an investigation by New Zealand website staff, and backed up by a former Dunedin policeman. Tom Lewis, who had worked the original case, claimed that New Zealand's Prime Minister Robert Muldoon kept the incorporated dent quiet for fear the royals would not want to return to the country if they knew just how close the Queen had come to being killed. He said, "You will never get a true file on that. It was reactivated, regurgitated, bits pulled off it, other false bits put on." It is a view backed up by Murray Hannon, Christopher Lewis's former lawyer. The fact an attempted assassination of the Queen had taken place in New Zealand, it was too politically hot to handle, he said. It was not the end of the story. 2 years later Lewis tried to escape from a psychiatric ward in order to kill Prince Charles, and in 1995 he was sent on a state-funded holiday during another royal visit, for fear he might once again threaten the Queen's life. He eventually committed suicide in 1997 aged just 33, electrocuting himself in his cell while awaiting trial for murder. But if the attempted assassination and its cover-up make for extraordinary reading, the details of the would-be killer's short life are bleakly tragic. Born in September 1964, Lewis's was an unhappy existence almost from the start. Expelled from kindergarten aged 5, he was unable to read or write until he was 8. His father had left by then, and his mother remarried a man he later described as a harsh disciplinarian who would beat him with a strap. "The taste of violence made me resentful," he wrote in his memoirs. Further expulsions followed, and in 1980, aged 16, he was sent for assessment to Cherry Farm Psychiatric Hospital, from where he escaped and with 2 friends, embarked on a crime spree in Dunedin. The gang set fire to a video store, burgled a church and several shops, and stole 5.22 rifles from his former Otago Boys High School. One of Lewis's friends, Paul Tain, remembered how, as their crimes became more violent, Lewis grew increasingly unhinged, even describing how he would stick pins into kittens for fun. Lewis also talked incessantly about a man he called the Snowman, supposedly from a British extremist group. The Snowman convinced him that if he were to kill the Queen, he would become a hero for right-wing terrorists worldwide. The following year, shortly before the Queen's visit, Lewis's gang held up a post office at gunpoint, making off with more than $5,000 in cash. As they left, Lewis's sawn-off shotgun accidentally went off, missing a terrified hostage by centimeters. On October 14, 1981, the teen would-be killer slipped into a lavatory on the 5th floor of the Adams building in Dunedin, from where he had a clear view of the royal motorcade, and took his shot. And perhaps most extraordinarily, after he fled the scene he was not followed, the building was not stormed, an investigation was not launched. The cover-up had already started. The assassination attempt only came to light after Lewis was arrested for the post office hold-up 8 days later. His confession astonished police, but rather than charge him with treason, details of the crime were quietly suppressed, and instead he was sentenced to 3 years in jail, including 12 months in a psychiatric hospital, for his part in the armed robberies. It was while serving time in Lake Calais Hospital in 1983 that he launched his failed escape bid in order to kill Prince Charles, but by 1987 he was once again at large. There followed a pattern of robberies and arrests, until in 1995, while he was on parole, when perhaps the most bizarre detail in the whole story occurred. With another royal visit planned, the New Zealand government paid for Lewis and his then partner to holiday at the Great Barrier Reef, with free accommodation, spending money and a vehicle, to get him out of the way before the tour. "I started to feel like royalty," he wrote. The following year Lewis led himself while awaiting trial for the murder of Tanya Furlan, who had been found battered to death in her home in Auckland. In a last twist, the man who had lived a life defined by violence since he was a boy died insisting that he was innocent of that final crime. For 37 years the full extent of Lewis's side story and the strange cover-up have remained hidden, though not to everyone. When asked in 1981 how he felt after attempting to kill the Queen, he replied, "Damn. I missed.